Hello. Just in time for all of the mainstream 3D printer manufacturers coming out with their own tool changes, I've just completed my project for a custom 6 toolhead tool changer using the SV08 as a base. This project was inspired by the Teaching Tech and the Next Layer, who have both either completed or mostly completed a similar project, and you can probably see some of the inspirations as I go forward. This video is not going to have any production value whatsoever. I'm just going to go through some videos and photos to kind of show you what's been done and talk about them as I go through. Happy to answer any questions in the comments or anything like that. So firstly, just a quick video showing this is now going to do the tool changing between the 6 different tools. There's nothing printing at the moment. I've just told it to go through the different tools, and it does restore the XYZ position after a tool change, and it will have a different parking position on the way up and the way down depending on which tool you have, to hopefully reduce any tangling of the umbilical cables at the top there. I believe I have it down going quite fast, quite efficiently. I've upped the Z speed of the SV08 just over 2 times, I believe. And so far it's been working really well. I've done some prints with about up to 1,000. I think 1,200 was the most changes I've done so far, and I will of course show those off a little bit at the end. So here I've got the bottom of the printer. Big obvious difference there is that I have that yellow section. I was having a lot of trouble with the stepper motors, and I was thinking that they were cabled incorrectly. I was getting a lot of shorts and a lot of misbehavior essentially, and I managed to blow one of the stepper drivers on the SV08 main board, and instead of replacing the whole board, and instead of or even looking at kind of different boards that would replace it, I just added a kind of daughter board, which is the SKR Pico, SKR, and that I've put in a 3D printed housing that I designed myself. Not particularly glamorous. Here we can see all of the shielding kind of removed. So you see on the right hand side, as those 2 other projects have done, I've installed a larger power supply. It's 350 watt, and that is feeding everything that was originally in this printer. It's also feeding the Pico and also the bird's nest USB toolhead board, which you'll see shortly. Closer look at the Pico there. So we've got 2 of these stepper motors coming from there. Technically I only needed to do 1, but as it was one of the AB motors, I felt it kind of appropriate to have the other AB motor also coming from the same board in case there would be any problems with communication time and the such. Not very clear, but on the right hand side I've got 2 limit switches. So I've changed from using the stepper motors, I can't think of what it's called, the limitless homing, sensorless homing, that's the one. I've added some limit switches. Now when I was having these problems with the stepper motors, my homing was really inconsistent, and I misjudged it and kind of assumed that it was, I was having inaccurate homing, that's the one, and I assumed it was something to do with the stepper motors, so I added some physical limit switches just to hopefully make that a bit more accurate. It turns out the stepper motors, they're just very sensitive to any movement of the cable, like any at all. Even with the hot glue that comes with the SV08, I had to very much make sure it was cable tied down really tightly, but with a little bit of slack, so that nothing would move relative to the stepper motor. And then we have USB-C coming out the top left. That goes back to the main SV08 board. And then we have the power at the top right there, going back to the power supply. And the very bottom middle, you can just see it there, is the fan placement for cooling the board. Here we have the main SV08 board. Not particularly much change here, other than the fact that 2 stepper motors have come away. That green USB cable there is for the bird's nest and the white USB cable is for the Pico. Closer look at the power supply there, nothing special, just added the Pico and the bird's nest to it. Another look at the housing for the Pico. Everyone's first suggestion of upgrading the SV08 is to get quieter fans. I probably made a bit of a mistake on these because their speed can't be controlled by voltage, and the boards don't have the appropriate pin in order to change the speed of these fans dynamically, but they're so silent that you can just have them running at 100% at all times and you wouldn't notice. And now we're on the back of the printer here. So this is the USB bird's nest. You see we have 6 toolhead cables coming out of the top there. We have 6 filament runout sensors coming out the back. We have the green USB-C in and the power cables coming in on the left. I've also got 2 extra connectors there, each with a single cable connected, and they are for the tangle detection on 2 of my filament sensors, which only currently 2 of the 6 have that functionality. If I want to go up to 6, I'll have to use the other 2 pins from this bird's nest, but the other 2 filament sensors will have to run all the way down back to the Pico probably, or even the main board to find a free data pin. There's only 4 available for the encoder for the tangle detection. And a nice magnetic cover on there. I will say when I started this project I intended everything to be nicely color coordinated, but so many of these pieces were edited or adjusted, reprinted over and over again to the point where it was impossible to keep track of what color needed to be where. Now I'll go back slightly. You'll see that the bird's nest is actually mounted a bit lower than it is on any of these other projects, and you'll see in a moment that allows me to have the umbilical cables coming from the top of the printer at a much more kind of uniform angle, which I felt would help with the tangling, which I still have an outstanding issue with, but I shall explain that in due course. Here we have some filament runout sensor kind of mount that goes on to my spool holder, which I mostly designed myself, but I did take a basic spool holder design, which I shall find and credit down below. And here are all of the filament runout sensor cables running around the back of the filament kind of spool holder and then back down to the bird's nest. It's quite a chunk of cables there. Could probably do with a bit more tidying. And here you see the bird's nest is just below, and as the cables come up, it allows me to kind of spread them out and pick 6 individual spots along the back of the SV08 for the cables that come from. This went through many iterations, and currently the going by the recommendations of Teaching Tech, I did go for some of that flat coiled spring. Currently there's too much give in the bracket that's mounted on the SV08, so they can still rotate a little bit too much. So I need to redesign that piece to make it a bit tighter. But otherwise, they're working perfectly well, way better than the piano wire. In fact, it's actually got 2 strands of piano wire each, just to add to the stiffness of that, because I really was having some trouble with tangling. It's probably my own. I have made the cables over long. And you see there, all 6 of the umbilicals going up and over. It's questionable as to whether or not I should have had the PTFE tubes going through those cable sleeves, but that's, if it causes a problem, I can change it. This is a bit of a closer look at the spool holder that I designed. Originally it was done on some 3D printed 2020 extrusions, but they didn't print particularly well, so I made them a bit more basic to only have the holes that I needed them to have. This essentially could be modular and go on for quite a bit longer, but I only needed 6. It's not perfect. It could probably be designed better to reduce some friction, but it is functioning for now. The brackets, I believe I took from the Teaching Tech. He uploaded all of his files, and I edited a bit to make it just a bit longer so that I could have enough clearance between the spool holder and the umbilicals to include the PTFE tubes and the filament runout sensors. It takes up a lot of space, this filament holder, and you can see that it's kind of precariously screwed on at the back. It's perfectly stable, but it does take up a lot more space. And here we have the front where I've got the tool heads mounted. You see I've got 4 of the original SV08 tool heads with custom housing, and I've got 2 of the I'm going to forget the acronym. Is it LMG? The large bearing version of the Spartacus by CN3D. I wanted to try and make my own tool heads. Never done that before, but they took a lot longer, cost a lot more money because I broke a lot of tool boards in the process, and are probably just a little less reliable than the ones that I purchased. Not because of the design, but because of my craftsmanship, which is quite shoddy, let's say. Now, here is a bottom bracket for the 2020 extrusions. It just keeps the tool heads much more stable. If you don't have anything holding it at the bottom, they wobble quite a bit, and with 6 of them moving quite fast, you really don't want to have too many inaccuracies with the loading and unloading process. And much the same as the Teaching Tech videos, I've used this top bar bracket for a 2020 extrusion to hold the top 2020 in place. This is a fairly heavily modified version of the CN3D's SV08 tool head enclosure or shroud. They're actually not flat across the bottom, and I was having quite a bit of trouble making sure that the docks are all aligned and consistent in picking up, so I effectively flattened everything down. I removed the original file had space for an extra part fan, or sorry, a tool heater block fan, that's the one. I removed that because I didn't have enough fans to accommodate that, and I added some kind of spacers to allow some magnets. I did some measuring in Blender, which is where I did all my models, and made sure that the magnets would come in contact at the perfect angle and perfect location. And here is my slightly modified and definitely shoddy work on the Spartacus tool head. I won't go into everything that I've put in there in terms of the boards, the heaters and extruders and whatnot, but it is all using some of the recommended kit that Nadir at CN3D put up on the Printables website. The cable tie is there because my cabling was not particularly tidy and it needed to be quite narrow so that it didn't interfere with the tool head next to it. And here we have the back of the tool head. You see it's got a mount, which I don't believe I edited at all. I think I just downloaded that from Printables. It allows the SV08 tool head to work with stealth changer hardware. You see, got the tap sensor on the back, which takes the place of the probe that comes with the original SV08 tool head, and the rear part fan has been removed. It still seems to have adequate part cooling. The shroud by CN3D includes its own kind of distribution of that fan's power, which seems to cover it quite nicely. With all the stealth changer hardware, the bed needed to be raised and moved forward slightly, so I used these models that I found online, which again I will try and find and credit. You'll notice that there is a heat set in, I can never say that, there's a threaded insert there, and that is for the 6 bolt trigger. So I struggled quite a bit finding a place to put the probe on the somewhere where the tool heads could access, but not somewhere that would get in the way all the time. And unfortunately, I did not have the kind of good idea that Teaching Tech had to make a magnetically attachable probe where the conductivity was done through the magnets. That's a really good idea. But I made it so that I would have to screw in the probe whenever I wanted to use it, and then unscrew it and take it away afterwards, which the calibration of the alignments of the tool heads is not something you should necessarily need to do all the time, so I don't see that as being too much of a problem. I used the cables that came from the original pressure probe on the SV08. I take one of the cables away because we only need 2 pins for the probe. And you can see here that I've just got a small brace that kind of makes sure that that sex spool probe does not move as it's being used, because it's obviously we need it to be quite accurate. I also used, this is another person's design, for a nozzle wiper for the SV08. This is mounted on the gantry, so no matter where you are in the Z or the Z coordinates, it will always be in the same relative XY position. I've edited the macros such that if you do a tool change and the tool head has a configured a target temperature, then it will complete a nozzle wipe, otherwise it won't, which is quite useful. And here we're looking at the end stops that I've put in for the X, and this is the Y end stop. This again was CN3D. I've pretty much directly used this one. It fits just underneath on the right hand side of the gantry. But here I had to model my own. It's based on the CN3D design, but this is the X end stop. I could not use the CN3D's version because the tool changer shuttle got in the way, so I had to design something else that was done on the top. It's not particularly pretty, but it serves its function. So this is on the top on the right hand side, and then we're just focusing on the black printed section there. It's a little post that's attached to the carriage that will hit that X end stop. Obviously it means you can only home X when you're at the back end of the gantry, but it serves my purposes at least. Here we have the shuttle for the stealth changer. You can see it's seen better days. Due to the geometry of the SV08 original tool head, I had to chop off the bottom of this shuttle because the shuttle would touch the bed before the nozzle would. Obviously I could reprint it with edited geometry, but at this point I'd already done all of the recommended kind of heat soaking to allow the bushings and the pins to kind of align themselves. So I did chop it off and it's working really well. To address the belt kind of connections, I used the original metallic backplate of the tool head. I just chopped the top of it off so that it doesn't get in the way of the tap sensor, and that holds the belts, and then the shuttle is just screwed on the front. As far as I can tell, it's pretty much the exact same design as everyone else has used, other than the metallic part is not printed, it's the original. And this is just a couple of prints that I've done with this. Those shells there, because of the orientation I wanted to print them in for ease of kind of post-processing, that was actually just over 1,000 changes, and it went through really nicely. This is all just for my kids. I haven't particularly done anything too serious on it yet. A number of turtles. There are 2 actual errors on this one. So the yellow one, the white got tangled halfway through, and I haven't actually implemented the tangle fix, the tangle detection on either of those filament sensors just yet. And the same goes for 2 of the small ones where the black has run out or became tangled. It didn't run out. And the 3rd small one, that is a user error in its eyes. The iris is not quite the right color. That was a search and replace for a different, changing the colors without having to go upstairs and change all the filament spools over. So complete user error, that one. The large green one printed perfectly, no problems at all, straight through. Massive benefit to this tool changer is not having to worry about the waste so much. I do have a K2 Plus, which originally I thought was going to be amazing because of the multicolor, and it is an amazing printer, but the waste that it produces, and any of the other kind of MMU printers, is quite substantial, and it makes you not want to print multicolour things because it costs a lot, it takes a lot of time, and it's quite error prone. So I found it great to just be able to print anything in colour and not really worry about the waste. It's almost negligible. Now these two aren't particularly technically difficult in terms of multicolour. I added these just to illustrate the fact that I printed these normally. If I was doing this on a colour changing printer, I'd do these object by object because there's no point swapping in between the yellow and the red. But the waste is so negligible that I just threw these two on. And whilst it doesn't particularly matter for this because they're quite short, you can think if you have two multicoloured objects that are quite different, it almost doesn't really matter if you do them at the same time if they're an awkward shape and don't really work object by object. Yeah, so it's been really great so far. I'm quite looking forward to getting some more complex models going. I haven't gone into like the software side, but I'm using just a standard stealth changer. I went to the GitHub for stealth changer, implemented that. I did have to change quite a lot of the macros, particularly when I was having these issues with the stepper motors rather. It no longer completely kills the printer. If it fails to pick up a tool, it will just pause the print, which is quite nice because that saves a lot of time and makes errors a bit more recoverable. Also, I've removed the need for the rounded G0. So if anyone knows the stealth changer, normally it does all of its tool change pickup moves in kind of a rounded motion. And I found that seemed to put more strain on the stepper motors. I might be completely mad because it turned out to not be the motor's fault. It was the wiring and the kind of loose connectivity. But every time the rounded G0 codes were used, I was getting a lot of skipping. So I did experiment with reducing the velocity and the acceleration, but it seemed to be more reliable if I removed the rounded G0 completely. So I redid all the macros I could find and completely got rid of its use. It may still be in there somewhere. And that's probably all I've got for now. I don't think there's any more. Thanks for watching. If anyone has any questions or anything, then please let me know. If anyone thought this was going to be a dark cloud thing, I am hopefully going to get back to that at some point. It's been a bit of time since I've looked at it, but for anyone who's not seen a video of mine before, you don't know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, thanks for watching.